Welcome back. So here we are with the SSTU lander in Kerbal Real Solar System using Realism Overhaul with some configs that for the lander that I've been tweaking recently. We have it on the surface of the moon, and we're getting ready to rendezvous back with the return vehicle, which is currently in orbit. So ready to go. I just need to turn. Oh no! Let's let it fall back there. That was a mistake. Shut down the descent engine and then have everything ready, because as soon as we break with the lower craft, we want to head away from it. And stage, there we go. So I think I've got something wrong with this ring, obviously. I don't want it coming with me, but when I don't have it in its current position, either things won't connect nicely or the engine won't connect. I need to, I think, figure out the attached direction of some of those parts. So still, polish to be done on this mod. So I'm watching my time to AP because I don't want to let that creep up too high, or I'm definitely going to overshoot the target. So I want to bring down this relative inclination, even though I can't currently see the craft that I'm trying to rendezvous with on the nav ball here. But bringing that down is definitely a good start. So down to 13 degrees. So this vessel, like I said, still working on the configs for this, because it doesn't precisely represent something that was actually built. And the Altair, while there's lots of nice pictures of it, I could have trouble finding some good sources for it. So I need to revisit that a bit. But it has enough delta V to get to orbit. It's just it can't necessarily be the active partner in a rendezvous, I find. Meaning it doesn't have enough fuel to do a burn to match the precise orbit of this guy, and to do tiny inclination changes, or to put their orbits a little bit out of phase for the rendezvous, things like that. So I might switch to that other vessel as the active partner for that. Let's see, time to AP is increasing, so I'm just following surface velocity now. I'll have to start pitching a little bit above that to keep this from falling too quickly. Last time I did this, or I was kind of testing this out, it was about, let's see, set as target. I felt pretty good at around 50 seconds or so to AP, and just kind of holding it around that point. So let's see, relative inclination is still coming down, but not as fast, and I know I can bring it down to a lot lower than that. See, I'm not sure which values, let's see, look at the editor for this template window. See, I'm not sure which values I should be, let's see, adding to this window to get the most information to tell me when is a good time to launch, or when I'm pretty close to the plane of this, because our relative inclination was clearly, kind of not making any sense to me. So there's got to be another value, but again, I'm not a good celestial mechanic, and so if anybody knows, what are good numbers to put up in a MechJab or a Kerbal Engineer window in order to get a good view of what's going on in relation to a rendezvous from the surface, please let me know. I would definitely like to be better at this. This is kind of one of the things I find most difficult. It's certainly an interesting challenge, because some missions to the moon or other bodies in the solar system require rendezvous on surface. So being able to go both ways of this, either from the surface back up to a rendezvous in orbit, or from an orbit down to rendezvous specifically at a certain point on the planet, I find extremely difficult, and haven't had any mission profiles I've carried out yet that required me to actually get good at that. Oh, slipping, the time to AP is dropping. So let's see, relative inclination is falling, so I know that I've yawed enough, to the side, so that's good. Still looking to find good data for the Altair to put to these parts. And the engines, as shown in SSTU, certainly are different. They're not modeled at all to look like the Altair parts. Maybe that'll happen at some point. Shadow Mage makes tons of parts, and these were one of his earlier creations, but they're one that I really took a shine to, because they're just very few parts in Realism Overhaul, I find, that have good properties to land on the moon, anything other than just LEM parts, like kind of replacements for the Apollo lunar module parts. But if you need a bit more thrust or a bit lower thrust that are have reasonable support, Realism Overhaul, they're certainly hard to find. Let's see, 20 seconds. Oh, still getting ahead. And how about that relative inclination? Oh, it's dropped below a degree now, so even if I can get that really low, I'm just going to decrease the yaw rate a bit here, so in case I'm not paying enough attention to it, it doesn't wander too far away from that target. But I'm going to get pretty close to the plane of my target, which is excellent, which is my goal. Because the closer you are to being exactly the same inclination as that, so that'd be kind of the tilt relative to, say, the axis of the moon, because that's something we're going to have the exact same value of that for a good docking. And so the closer you are to already having that when you're meeting up in space, the better. Oh no, I'm basically ending up making this the AP. Well, that's not the worst thing. Ultimately, we need to do. They're called phasing orbits in MechJeb, and I think it's a good name. Didn't work too well for me last time in a test, but I don't mind trying to do them myself, even if it requires a little bit of hand calculation. Because I'm not going to come up exactly, like I want to be in the exact same orbital path as this, but at the same time, if I'm in the exact same orbital path, if we're separated by some distance, then other than tiny variations in our actual orbits, like we're not going to get any closer to each other. So here you can see as I'm coming up and as he's coming closer to me, the distance number there at the bottom is decreasing. So if we're in the exact same orbit, we're not going to get closer. You're not in any meaningful amount of time. So a phasing orbit you set up where one of the partners is in a slightly higher or a slightly lower orbit where they've got a point, at least one point where the orbits cross each other. 0.7. Oh, it's starting to increase. So let me throttle to 0. Okay. So you set the orbits so they're a little bit different, which means they have different periods. So they come back to the same spot. They pass through the same spot, but at different times. So that allows one to catch up to the other, or one to slow down so the other can catch it. Whichever one is set to be phased. So a larger orbit around a body takes longer to carry out, even if it's small amounts. Even if I'm only phasing by a few seconds, or only a few seconds in an orbit, that's still plenty, because you're moving so fast in orbit. If you only want to close a couple of kilometers, then even that little bit of phasing is good enough, is sufficient for what you want to do. And I find in the tools, at least with MechJeb, part of that is just because there's so many tools, and I am certainly no expert in MechJeb. I find it difficult to kind of find the right tools to calculate that phasing myself, without kind of letting it run and orbit around and observe what's going on. Oh, let's pitch back down. So one thing you can do in MechJeb is actually type in that number manually and then execute. But I change the numbers so often I prefer to do the clicking. But if I want to make a big jump and don't want to wait, I'll do it that way. So I still want to keep the AP pushed out. Some, maybe not a ton, because I do want to add some altitude here. So even the kind of the angle, the trajectory you use to come up to match with your partner can make a huge difference, and there's just a ton of variables. Rendezvous is really challenging. I really like carrying out the Gemini, Gemini Aegina mission, where they both launch from Kennedy, and they match orbits. That's a really challenging and interesting one I like. But doing it in moon orbit, because you've done so much else before this point just to get here, I find it quite nerve-wracking. So it's still not routine to me at all. And I haven't spent a bit of time just practicing it to get really good at it. So my understanding of a bit of the history is that it's like, I feel like a lot of the lunar stuff was kind of run by computer and by radar. And so I imagine they used a good amount of kind of very specialized computer hardware and programming to make sure that they would match these up, because I only stayed in the orbit for a couple hours or something like that, which is even shorter than the shortest, the H-class Apollo landing missions, whereas the J-class ones, they were on the surface for days and days. And so, the moon orbits a bit during that time. The orbital path will change if it's not right over, right around the equator. Various orbital mechanics terms I can't say quite right. I'll level myself off. Oh, see, it's matching velocities. So now it's showing me my velocity difference of target, even though our orbits clearly won't hit. Oh, I'm going to be right under it. So the longer you're on the surface, kind of the more your planes have a chance. The orbital plane versus where you are on the ground, that kind of the potential planes you could move up to, will diverge substantially. So you'd need some pretty interesting computer code to match that, to figure that out. The most efficient orbital transfer. Oh wow, I'm really getting a low orbital inclination. So even if, so because I'm lower, thankfully I'm only a little behind. So once I'm in orbit, because I'm lower, I'm going to move faster across the surface, relative to the surface, say, compared to the other guy. Okay, so I don't want this to get too high, so I'm going to stop it at 60, just kill the engine, and I might have to do kind of like surprisingly, a stock Kerbal type maneuver and burn the engine again at AP to make it a real orbit. But thankfully, I've been just for testing and everything. I've given this thing 6 relights. I don't know. It's just a stressor that I don't care for when I'm testing things. To have to worry about something that isn't really the specific facet of the mission that I'm testing, trying to prove out. But there's definitely something to say for engines to have more relights like that in the game, because if somebody wants the challenge of trying to hand fly these and figure them out, who's to say that having more relights just doesn't make that more fun and more of a challenge for them? So at some point I'd like to show people how to, it's really easy to alter the Realism Overhaul files, either to make it so ullage no longer occurs if you don't enjoy having to settle your fuel, or that you get unlimited lights, or you can customize the lights number yourself to really, it's a game, right? So you can customize it how you'd like to be playing it. All right, so we're catching up, and kind of if you draw a line, say, out from the center of the moon out to it, it would pass through, and we'd be a bit behind that. So at some point we'll be at our closest approach. Oh, interesting, I forgot I have that in the docking window here. So closest we'll ever be is 29 kilometers away from each other. And because we're at a lower point at pretty close orbital speed, what's going to happen is we're going to just shoot past. We're going to end up ahead of the target. So I think what I'm going to do is circularize once we hit 60. So we're going to probably pull ahead because we're lower. Oh, maybe not. Maybe we're just not at a high enough speed, or I'm not viewing it at the right angle. But we're not starting to pull ahead because this is a pretty substantial difference. So I want to circularize it once we get there. Actually, can I use MechJeb to do that? Show off the features of MechJeb again. Let's see. Maneuver planner, circularize at next. Is this the AP? Yeah. All right, create node. So it's just a small burn to do that. So let's get it to target the node. I think I might have made the RCS a little, oh, come on, load it up, a little aggressive on, it's a little strong on this craft. Is it going to stop rotating? There we go, it stopped rotating. All right, so it is execute next node. All right. Because this is so much heavier than the stock SSTU, I just kind of had to take some guesses at how strong the RCS should be, because it was way too weak. So it seems like it's a little over strong with this vessel, with the what are you? The LC3, so the 3-man Ascent vehicle, LC3-pod. Estimated burn time, and it passed it. So I don't know why it didn't. It's not cranking up the engine. I don't know why. Abort node. See, there's just these unknowns. I'm not getting any feedback from MechJeb. Kind of wish there was a debug window, or perhaps there is, and I just don't know how to open it. But I don't know why it came and went the precise node time to do this circularization. And off. The thing that I really want out of MechJeb, that I really like that it has when it works, is the ability to exactly cut off that engine right at that time. Because just doing it by eye and hand, it's just not precise enough for many maneuvers, where a couple of meters per second can make a huge difference. If you shut off the engine 0.1 seconds too late, it's too much of an overshoot. And that's even more critical in Realism Overhaul because of the differences of the limited number of ignitions, because you can't just, okay, pump the engine up again, because it's going to waste one of my 4 remaining ignitions. So I've got into a pretty decent orbit here, around 60 kilometers. So I'm certainly lower. So in order to, let's see, for us to meet up, either I would have to move to a further out orbit with this guy, which would be difficult with the fuel and everything I have remaining, but I could certainly do it. I could do another couple of burns, one to get, well, actually it doesn't need to be a burn. Let me see. Oh, it's so tricky with the kind of the camera tools you have. I kind of wish I could just follow along this path and look for spots. So if I target myself there, just be pretty close to straightforward. Okay, and now I watch this. I want these to meet up. So I'm just using RCS to do that right now, and lo and behold, the cool stock tools have noticed that our orbits, oh wow, we actually get fairly close there. So I want there to be a point where our orbits are pretty much identical. There we go. Wow, we get really close. So how close are we right now? About the same as we are now. See? So once we're like at pretty similar orbits, we end up with that problem. And it would be good to be near the descending node, because then I can do my tiny inclination change at the same spot. So that's going to be, and it's on the daytime side. So what I'm doing here is trying to kind of set up the future spot where we will meet. So here it'll be on the daytime side, so it'll be nicely lit. That was just luck, but I'm sure there's good planning ways to get that to happen consistently. And right at a descending node, which means it's the best spot for me to change the inclination, the tilt of the orbit, so that we're exactly overlined. So because I think I still have enough delta V in this upper stage in order to put this guy on the outer track, just slightly further out, but I might try to do it with RCS too. So I'll leave that here because it's already about my average length of video, and I'll do that in a later video. So you'll see us plan and carry out a burn here to get us into a phasing orbit where the other guy can catch back up with us. Because right now, well, we're going to end up ahead. I'm pretty sure by the time we get over there. So it'll let us end up on the same orbit at the same spot at the same time. All of that is necessary for a rendezvous and then for docking. So thank you for watching again. Hope you look forward to the next video. Goodbye.